okay, so that's all. I just wanted to conclude because I'd gone over time like the raving lunatic that I seem to be whenever I get off on these ideas. So God as a theme, as a thematic concept, or exemplar, or prototype, or whatever, all of the the different the different terms that they use now in cognitive science today for for concepts. Um, like I said, there are there's concept, there's prototype, exemplar. I'm trying to remember what the other ones are. I can't really remember right now. But all these are different ways of thinking about ideas and relations between ideas, et cetera, et cetera. We should also think about how these concepts are implemented in our everyday life. I think this is close to what Wittgenstein would call a form of life. A language game is not just the language, it's speaking or written language itself. It's the way that the role that these and the function that these words and themes and dispositions play in our life, which is similar to what the later Husserl would call horizon. So God is a horizon, which is what withdraws in order to let the world disclose itself to us. What sort of shapes the background? No, because that couldn't be it. Okay, so but it's the margin of our awareness. It's sort of like the way our body shapes our perception. Never, the eye will never perceive it itself. There's always a visible and an invisible. Always, as Husserl said, a structure of the known and the unknown in experience and judgment. Anyway, okay, so there's God as theme, which is the concept or the idea. Obviously, it's not going to be anything visual or tactile. It's going to be something more like sound. God as the contextual. I don't know if that could. God could be a potential theme for. Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, God as something that it's a potential theme for discussion. Like on YouTube, you're watching something about has God on the subject, and he's talking about something, and then God comes up finally. God was sort of in the context. He was a potential, or the concept of God as object, was a potential theme. So it could be a theme, a potential theme, which is in the context, or the horizon. And the horizon is not thematizable at all, which is different. Which is the difference between a horizon and a figure or figure background. I mean, a background of figure can always swap places, right? But the horizon is different. God as a principle of genetic density. I mean that as in the way that Anthony Steinbach, in his book Home and Beyond, 1995 book, great book. Definitely read Home and Beyond by Anthony Steinbach. So good. Just really gets to the heart of what you're wondering about. That is conference report. So yeah, all these different ideas. And let me just back here. Another book would be, which I think you would really be into, Fred, is called The Sphere of Attention, Context and Margin, and that was written by let's see if I can get this in there. Sven Arvidsson. It's a 2006, 2007 book. I think that's what I'm working on right now is the fusion of static, genetic, and generative phenomenology by bringing what I think is pretty good static account, maybe slightly genetic account of that was done by Arvidsson in The Sphere of Attention. He draws on mainly the works of Edmund Husserl and Aaron Gerbich, with, I think, the enactive approach to cognition, which is Evan Thompson's book, 2007, Mind and Life. I think that's a good genetic description of how, so static is how things look now, in the most general sense, the phenomenology of that. Genetic is how did things come to look this way through experience, and generative is how over the longest stretch, so we're getting longer periods of time. Static is a sort of now kind of, a moment, I guess you could say. Genetic is like how over developmental time did this come to be, and really you can't really separate these because there's the longest period of time, which is generative, which is about how over culture, historical time do we get these places of cultural tradition to come together? You know, how is it that these structures that are bigger than any one of us have come to be, and traditions and things like that? We can never make thematizable, but are always there structuring our experience, whether we want to admit it or not. Which sort of precludes which discounts the idea of neurobiological or neuropsychological reductionism. Another book I want to recommend is Did My Neurons Make Me Do It? It's a 2007 book. Brown and Nancy, I think, wrote it. It's a really good book. You should definitely read the description. Anyway, so these are all different ways that I was talking about before of talking about God. And I think that we should definitely promote the discussion about God. I don't think that we should stop talking about God. I think we need to think about new ways of talking about God, because obviously there's some import there. I mean, it's just too old, too important of an idea to let go of. We just need to find a way to interpret it, or many ways to interpret it, such that we can make sense of, of what is inherently a normative and socio-historical question. As Professoranton was saying, what ought we to do with ourselves here? I mean, ought, physical, how ought this book to fall when I drop it on the ground? It's not a question that gets asked by physical things. Only at the level of human socio-historical reality, and maybe in a marginal way in higher animals, such as primates, do questions of how ought we do this come into play. And I think it starts with how ought I if I want to look at this object, what's the optimal distance to view this from? What is the optimal position in my orientation and my perception and my discussion with the camera that's in front of me? What is the optimal range of distance? That sort of embodied feeling of what's the optimal experience, where it's as merleau-ponty would say, or as his interpreters would say, Hubert Dreyfus would say, what's the maximum grip upon a situation? When you're merleau-ponty gives the example of being in a museum, looking at a piece of art, because every artwork has a certain optimal distance from which it can be viewed. It's not just us. It's really the world based on our social historically embedded past directs us to how the artwork demands to be seen and viewed, or solicits, effectively pulls us or pushes us, toward viewing it. I think that God may be also a way of a society gaining a maximal grip on its situation, meaning the situation. Whether you employ God as a concept, or as a reference, an index for punishing someone. Oh, we must do this because God said so, or whether it's the actual experience of God, or what that is interpreted as God. In that sense, really is the experience of God. I mean, if it's not, what else is? So I mean, all animals project a sort of normative, optimal situation, and so in that sense, when an amoeba finds a grain of sugar, that in it, that's it's its optimal, that will bring it more toward its optimal state of glucose metabolization and energy expenditure. That's no different than a whole society finding its optimal grip on its situation, on trying to cope with life and trying to cope together. And the etymology of the word religion means to bind fast. Humans are essentially the time-binding species. We bind the past. You need the past to give your life meaning. I mean, we're the one species that needs that. And so, in a sense, faith is essential for knowledge, because early man had to come up with some